Hope everyone is doing well. We'd like to thank our sponsors for this drasha, Dr. Lori and Dr. Stuart Cohn, in honor of all the Bali Kriyan Gaboyim who have done a tremendous job in these trying times. Thank you so much, and very much agreed. Sponsored by Faye Kasser, in honor of her grandson, Avram Benjamin Ben Moshe Yaakov's Bar Mitzvah, son of Moshe and Shira Kasser of Rehovot, Israel. And for those of you like myself who remember this young man, he goes by Avi Kasser, who we definitely remember from his earlier years in this community. Mazel Tov to Faye and the entire Kasser family on his simcha. And we also thank Debbie and Jeff Weinstein and family who are sponsoring in honor of Rabbi and Mrs. Benjamin Silver, thanking them for all they have done for our community. And that's a wonderful initiative as well. So thank you so much to all of our sponsors. I also want to take the opportunity to wish a Mazel Tov to Yisrael Katz. Yisrael Katz is celebrating an Ufraf in the shul this Shabbos. Unfortunately, probably not as big size as he and his family had hoped for, but it's a very lovely simcha. Yisrael, son of Seth and Masha Katz, grandson of Howard Katz, is getting married next week, God willing, to Esther Meisler, a daughter of Jan and Naomi Meisler, granddaughter of Jules and Bobby Meisler. So it's a real YASC simcha, and mazel to the Katz and Meisler families, and Yisrael and Esther should have much bracha and mazel together for many years to come. So we know, of course, that this Shabbos that we're going into now is famously known as Shabbos Nachamu. Nachamu is normally translated, the word Nechama is normally translated as being associated with consolation. It's always a little bit of a difficult thing if we're coming off of the 3 weeks that we emphasize the destruction of the Bati Mikdash, of the temples. So the consolation will surely come, God willing, when we have a third Beis HaMikdash. But until that point, what exactly does it mean to be consoled anyway? Are we not supposed to be upset that we don't have a Beis HaMikdash? Of course we're supposed to be upset that we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. So why do we talk about consolation? And many commentators explain you have different contexts in which this root is used in the context of God, that God was Vayinachem, again, loosely translated, he was consoled, but it doesn't seem to make much sense in that context. And the meaning in the context of Hashem seems to be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu pivoted to a new approach. And the truth is, if you think about Nechama in that way for us, Shabbos Nachem was a very significant thing. It actually fits in very meaningfully to what we discussed last Erev Shabbos, that much of the goal of Tisha B'Av is through mourning and through focusing on the terrible loss of the temples and other sorrows, other travails throughout people's history. It's an opportunity to recalibrate, in a sense, and understand what's really important. So then the idea of Nechama is not only recognizing that, of course, it's a tragedy to not have a Beis HaMikdash, but if one recognizes that days, more positive days will be coming, God willing, then one can internalize the priorities set by mourning the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, and yet one can pivot, one can develop a new outlook, a new focus point in terms of looking towards the positive and seeing how the lessons that I've reflected on from the mourning period can be a great merit for myself, can be a great merit for our people, and that will bring us all the closer to the positive developments of the coming, that we'll talk about in the Haftorahs of the coming weeks. By the way, when you talk about pivoting, it's such an interesting idea. We have 3 Shabbosos of more harsh prophecies, and they are followed by Shiva D'Nechemta, 7 Shabbosos of Haftorahs of, for lack of a better translation, consolation. And that actually, if you think about the calendar for a moment, 7 Shabbosos brings us all the way up to Rosh Hashanah. So if we're going to think about pivoting from Tisha B'Av, so we needed to mourn the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash so we understand what's important. But now that we do that, we need to pivot and think about how we're going to grow as Jews and how we're going to connect to God in a greater way. And that priority is all the more significant for us since we've had the mourning of the Beis HaMikdash. And in that spirit, I'd like to share with you two ideas on a pasuk that we say daily. Near the end of this week's Parsha, Parshas V'eschanan, we have the pasuk of V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha. You should love Hashem your God, v'chol levavcha, v'chol nafshecha, v'chol modecha. All of your heart, all of your soul, and all of your abilities, finances, different ideas. I want to just share with you a Sforno, this idea of what it means to love God. And I'm not sure the Sforno's comment here is such a novel idea, but I think he frames it in a way that we can really relate to. And perhaps the exact way that he frames it is a little bit new for us. The Sforno says that what it means to love God is tismach lasos davar sheyitav be'inav. Rejoice in the opportunity to do something that will be looked upon favorably by God. Kasher Tavin, when you reflect and you understand, Shein Tachlis Nichbad Kazeh, there is no greater purpose in this world than doing something with which God finds favor. And so we talk very philosophically about serving God through love or serving God through reverence, and this is not at odds with any of that, of course. But the basic idea is essentially be happy that you can do a mitzvah. Look at yourself as fortunate that you can do a mitzvah, and recognize that's the greatest sense of fulfillment a person can have on this planet. You know, we've discussed it every now and then over the years, but it bears repeating. I once, when I was still in high school education, I had the opportunity to sit with a number of high school Rabbeim, with the head of an institution that's all about dealing with young men who have severe challenges in keeping strong in their Yiddishkeit. And we asked him, we said, you're seeing sort of the situations that when things don't go well. If you could give us some guidance, just in terms of what should be the road that we take, that God willing everything should go smoothly in our students' education. He said, I just want to tell you one thing. We need to raise our children with this basic idea of Ashreinu Matov Chalkeinu. How very fortunate we are. How very fortunate we are to be Jews. How very fortunate we are to have Hashem's Torah. How very fortunate we are to observe mitzvahs. That is a powerful thing to think about when we try to raise our children, grandchildren, other young people attached to us. But if it's powerful for them, it has to be powerful for us too. And if we're thinking about pivoting and beginning to focus a little bit on moving towards Elul and Rosh Hashanah, this is a very significant idea. To try to make a greater realization within ourselves that if we go to do a mitzvah, we're fortunate. It's not that we have to do it. It's we get to do it. What an opportunity. One idea. The other idea I would just like to share with you is, as many of you are probably aware, there's a famous discussion in the Gemara. So we say you should love God with all of your life, with all of your soul. And that's understood to mean that if, heaven forbid, even if someone's life was at risk, person threatens to take someone's life over the person's connection with Judaism. And of course, there are halachas about this, but there are certainly circumstances where the halacha is one should be willing to give up one's life. So love God with your life. If it means that you have to give up your life for the service of God, do it. And then the Gemara understands that b'chol modecha means with all of your money. So the Gemara says, if you tell me I should be willing to give up my life, doesn't that also mean, by extension, I should be willing to give up my money? Isn't life more valuable than money? So the Gemara, it's a very famous Gemara, the Gemara says, there are some people for whom money is more exciting than their life. Okay, I'm sure many have heard a line like that, not in the context of the Gemara. But it's always somewhat of a perplexing. And there's a lot of discussion, and obviously there are some very deep ideas about that are very relevant to our lives. But I want to share with you a Meshech Chachma. The Meshech Chachma takes a very different tack towards this pasuk, and towards specifically the phrase, V'chol modecha. And he says, if you tell a person that they need to, like Avram Avinu, jump into a fiery furnace to give up their life in expression of their belief in God, that's very, very frightening. But we somewhat have a potential to do that. Part of the the way that we could get to that is it's so exciting almost. It's so dramatic. We do well in dramatic moments. Everyone's different, but as a whole, we do well in dramatic moments. I'll give up my life for the service of God. And of course, part of our ability to do that is we've inherited that capacity from Avram Avinu himself, back to Avram's experience with the fiery furnace. But, says the Meshech Chochmah, let's say it's not about giving up one's life. Let's say these are not his examples, but let's say it's about schlepping out on a night that you're tired to go to a Marav. Let's say it's about having the patience to speak kindly on the phone to someone for whom you have no patience. Let's, let the examples go on and on. Things that are not so exciting to do, that for one reason or another, and obviously each one of us can have our own things, we might find challenging. Says the Meshech Chochmah, that's what we're talking about with Chom Odecha. Chom Odecha, according to this, means in all of your circumstances, in all of your situations. It could have to do with assets that you have. He actually cites the famous idea of Yaakov Avinu going back to get the Pachin Ketanim, the small flasks, the 4 small jugs, because he believed that if he owned these things, it must be that God had a purpose for him to own those things. So he expended energy towards that, and that was actually an expression of his belief in God. But the Meshech Chochmah says it doesn't only have to be about money. It could be about anything. That any moment that we have the opportunity to serve Hashem, due to the circumstances, due to the situation in which we find ourselves, and we are for whatever reason inclined not to do it, and we rise to the occasion and we do it, that is an expression of love of God, extremely different than giving up one's life, but in a sense it might be more difficult, because giving up one's life is dramatic, and this is not dramatic. And to begin to think that way over these next coming weeks, COVID has made us rethink so much of our lives and what's essential, what's not essential, and what's really important, what's not really important. We've discussed this before. I don't want to get into it now. But to think in different ways, what circumstances can I either maximize in service of God, or can I apply in a different way to serve God more appropriately? I just want to give you an example. I'm recording this Thursday night. Not long ago, I was walking out of Mariv with a person, and I was at the late Mariv, so by the time we were walking out, Tishba was over, and he said to me he's so excited to get in the car. So I assumed he was excited to get in the car because he was pretty hungry. That's what I assumed. He explained to me, he says, I get a daily recording of a shiur, and I normally find time to listen to it during the day. It's not a long shiur, it's just a few minutes. But we know the halacha is that on Tisha B'Av, regular parts of Torah we're not supposed to study on Tisha B'Av. So he said, I wasn't able to listen to it today. And I said to myself, wow, it's a few minutes. So the drive, by the time I'm leaving Mariv, Tisha B'Av will be over. It'll be permissible for me to study that Torah. So the drive from Shul to my home will be a few minutes, and I'll listen to the shiur. And I'm so excited about that opportunity. He floored me. He really, really did. Forget the fact that most of us would have been way too tired to apply our hearts and minds to a sophisticated thought at that moment. But he really was thinking about how to maximize the moment. And in a sense, that's really what the Meshech Chochmah is speaking about. So we should be zocheh that this Shabbos should bring us much nechama that we're pivoting. This has been a challenging summer in many ways, and in numerous ways, we're sort of looking forward to the fall now. Hopefully things will go well for us in all kinds of ways. Hopefully things will go all right from a public health perspective. Hopefully we're looking at Rosh Hashanah, we're looking at putting kids back in school, however that exactly works. There's a lot to look forward to. So my hope for all of us is we take these next 7 weeks between now and Rosh Hashanah and really pivot and hopefully internalize some of the ideas from the morning of the Beis HaMikdash, but channel them towards getting more excitement, more passion for our service of God, whether that be in our basic attitude about recognizing how fortunate we really are, whether it be in maximizing opportunities. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen. Have a wonderful Shabbos.